This is the Simpit video blog, and I use the word video blog very loosely here because I've kind of turned this into a topic, something very near and dear to my heart. But this story does come to us from topgear.com, where they have compiled their 50 greatest driving games of all time. This includes arcade, console, PC, every driving game ever made from the beginning of time until now, and ranking them 50 through number 1. They're releasing this in batches of 10 at a time, and in their first installment, which came out yesterday, they've ranked number 50 down to number 41. So I thought this would be a really good time to really test our knowledge, test our wisdom, and in some cases show your age if you know some of these titles. And I just want to kind of go through this list because it really is something important to me. When I think back a time when arcades, when penny arcades started to become those quarter-sucking arcades, and it was video games, whether you're talking Pac-Man, Space Invaders, or the earliest games of driving sims. Some of them are on this list, and that for me was an opportunity to really think back to where it all started. So let's go ahead and start with the list and go through them one by one. I'm not sure if I'm going to do this every day. I know the new list, numbers 50 through 41, let me get this straight, numbers 40 through 31 are released today, in addition to the list that I'm presenting today, numbers 50 through 41. I'm sure I've confused you there, but again, let's go ahead and start the list with a game that started in 2002. The year Enron went bankrupt, Michael Jackson hung his kid out the window, and Angelina Jolie was the most popular woman on earth. And the game we are looking for was available for the Sony PlayStation 2, and it came out in Japan, made by Capcom. The game was known for its very detailed tuning options. Coming in at number 50 is Modelista, and I have to confess that I never actually played it. The year was 1988, and Mark McGwire hit 70 home runs in baseball. Bill Clinton messed around with his assistant, and the Mars orbiter crashed into Mars. And the original NES was a popular system. Not all racing games had to be based on realism, graphics, or physics, but this game was based on fun, jumps, oil slicks, and car hop-ups that you collected while driving made this top-down viewing angle game very unique. The game was RC Pro-Am by Rare, and it ranks number 49, and I spent many hours playing it myself. The year was 1991, and the Minnesota Twins had won the World Series. Christina Applegate was considered hot, and Pee Wee Herman was caught molesting himself in a porn theater. But the game of that same year was another top-down game that was a sequel to its predecessor 1 year earlier. The game was available for the Amiga and Atari ST systems at home. The game allowed for upgrades and, more importantly, gave you the ability to shoot your opponents with missiles. The game was made by a company called Magnetic Fields and was called Supercars 2 and comes in at number 48. In 1993, Magic the Gathering was taking over the world, and the Got Milk campaign had been created, and River Phoenix died outside of the Viper Room. But if you were hanging out in the tech arcade, you were waiting behind a line of kids to play this game. You were driving a Toyota Celica GT4 and only used a gas pedal and wheel to get around the track. The game was World Rally, and it was made by Atari and Galeco, and was one of the better early racing games, coming in at number 47 on the list. In 1983, Clint Eastwood was telling people to make my day. The computer mouse was invented, and The Return of the Jedi was number 1 at the box office. But if you were a gamer going to the arcades, then you were likely dropping oil slicks, blowing smoke screens, and shooting your opponents in this top-down, the world comes at you racing title. It was made by early gaming powerhouse Bally Midway, and one of my all-time favorite driving games, coming in at number 46, and it's called Spy Hunter. Topping the news in 1989 was the Exxon Valdez dumping oil all over Alaska. The Energizer Bunny had just been born, and the Nintendo Game Boy was the latest craze. But if you were at home gaming on the Amiga or the Atari ST, it comes from sim racing legend Jeff Crammond, but it isn't Formula One. You will be doing tricks like loops and running on an elevated track. The game was Stunt Car Racer and comes in at number 45 on the list. In 1999, the world was freaking out about the upcoming Y2K wiping out the world. The Denver Broncos won the Super Bowl, and both Payne Stewart and John F. Kennedy Jr. both died in plane crashes. Car chase or heist type games were alive and well. In this particular game, you could choose the setting from 3 different major cities, and you could be your own star of a car chase scene. First came out on the PlayStation only, but a year later was found on multiple platforms. It was made by GT Interactive Software, and it went by the name Driver, and it came in at number 44 on the list. Although 2012 wasn't that far back, we can still remember the year as the one in which Whitney Houston had died. The Los Angeles Dodgers were sold for $2.1 billion, and Dario Franchitti won the Indy 500. Top Gear was spinning their popularity into making games for the iPad. This one was another in the form of stunt driving, and in true Top Gear form had a comical feature to it. The game was Top Gear Stunt School Revolution, and they claim it's second to only Angry Birds, and it's also number 43 on the list. In 1976, Nadia Comaneci scored the first perfect 10 in gymnastics. Apple Computer was formed, and Happy Days was the number 1 thing on TV. But in 1976, it was exactly when these penny arcades were turning into these video game arcades taking quarters, and I remember it fondly as a child, because the arcade was one of my favorite places to play. And this game was a first-person driving game with a track made up of winding dashes that would come at you with changing speeds. That was all there was to the game, but it captivated me for hours. The game was Night Driver, and it was one of the fixtures of early arcades and coming in at number 42 on the list. Although we already covered 1993, other things that were going on were Jurassic Park topping the movie list, the Dallas Cowboys had won the Super Bowl, and federal agents raided the Branch Davidians in Waco, Texas. And meanwhile, this game was available on the Mega Drive and the SNES system. However, it spent its life in the shadows of Super Mario Kart. It wasn't always racing in cars per se. However, you could count on missiles, mines, and oil slicks to help you win. The game was made by Silicon and Synapse, and it was called Rock and Roll Racing, coming in at number 41 on the Top Gear Greatest Driving Games of All Time. So I wonder how many of you out there could remember or identify some of these games. They do date back quite some time. For me, it was a trip down memory lane. I got to remember that time when I'd go to these arcades and I'd play these driving games long before I had a license, and that's where it all started for me. So I will have the entire list and links to the Top Gear article at thesimpit.com. You can check it all out there for yourself, and you can take your own trip down memory lane. This is the Simpit video blog, and I'll see you on the track.